Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
And then in 1937, I am Don Gates, your filler speaker, an alcoholic. As those of you who have been regular attenders at this meeting know, for some reason starting at 7:30, our speakers are often right up to they push it right to the last second and sometimes beyond. And as a result, we need someone to do a few minutes until they get here, and that's what I have been doing. So in 1937, I've given parts of my story a couple of times here. This is also our first meeting in this particular facility, and I have doubts about its coziness. You know, you get a desire to do a little one-on-one when there's a speaker like we had last week. We send out a letter that we have printed up where we just have to substitute the names, and trying to give people directions to this facility, and we keep adding new things, and we're going to add the bit about try to get here about 15 minutes early now, I think. But we added last week, if you can't make it, do not send a substitute. It's a strange thing, no matter how good speakers are, when they choose substitutes, they tend to send someone who's very sincere. Now, I don't think I've ever heard anyone get up and say, I don't plan my talks, I just say what God tells me to say. And it invariably leads you to know that, among other things, God is not a speaker. But this particular facility poses mild problems, although if we fill it as well as this, it should be successful. A talk, by and large, it's still a public speech to a degree, and it sort of takes on the characteristics of the group, meaning those of us who are circuit riders, and I don't want to disillusion the newcomer, but there are people who do that. They speak more often than is good for mere mortals. And after a time, you get to where when we're talking to each other, we can identify where we spoke without actually naming the group. Like you can say, well, I was over at the Waxworks. That's a meeting over in Glendale where they wipe the faces of the audience during the coffee break, so you'll think they're alive. And each meeting is different partly because of the way it's constructed. If you're going to have a really responsive meeting, you have to have one with a low ceiling where people are jammed in together. And, well, you almost want to start rocking when you're in one of those groups, so the shoulders will start hitting, and because when they're tight like that, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and they become a mob. And you almost want to start the responses. Who'll say amen to that? Amen. Who'll say God bless Bill Wilson? God bless Bill Wilson. Don't take the first drink. Don't take the first drink. I don't think I'm going to be really happy until someday I give a talk and someone leaps up and speaks in tongues during the middle of it. It wasn't quite like that, but one time I was speaking just beyond any links out in the San Gabriel Valley where they read everything. I mean, not just the traditional things from the book, but individual prayers that and recitations that the members have made up, and everybody who gets up qualifies. Although why anyone would want to qualify, it's as if, we are gaining in stature, there's no question about that, but very few people sneak into AA just to try to get ahead socially. So if a person gets up and says, you know, I have a social disease, I don't say, prove it, whip it out. And so when a person says he's an alcoholic, I tend to believe him, but out in the San Gabriel Valley, everybody qualifies. And they had all of these prayers. And I was speaking with another person, and we arrived, and as they went along reading, qualifying, each of us was reducing down our talk, and we were both fairly new, so we had all sorts of things that were immortal. And we kept dropping these jewels until finally, I think it was 9:30. The meeting was going to be over at 10 when they took a coffee break. And neither of us had been up yet. And during the coffee break, some newcomer had the unmitigated gall to have a convulsion on our time. You know, I was just furious. Work the steps, fella, for Christ's sake, work the steps. But when it was over, I mean, we got his tongue down with a spoon, and the emergency squad in and packed him off. There wasn't much time left, but I noticed that the audience was particularly attentive because the message had been delivered already. That guy may not have been too articulate, but he was sure sincere. I tried to get him to work with me on further talks, but unfortunately he got sober. So, you see, in AA, the one thing that we're very careful about is to distinguish ourselves from organized religions, where, of course, we meet most of the time in facilities that have managed to struggle along without our insight for quite a few centuries. And we say we are a spiritual organization, not a religious one, which of course is true, and I think most of us understand what's meant by that, but sometimes it's said with the implication that religious groups are not spiritual, you know, which comes as a shock to the Pope, I'm sure. Because everything AA does, in a sense, is the same thing that these religious groups do in different ways. It's simply that we don't put dogma or credo around it. But the other things we do are essentially the same, but we have to be very careful never to use any terminology that sounds like it. We'll say, yes, I heard a great pitch at the Wednesday night meeting. I mean, none of us say, yes, I heard wonderful testimony at the Wednesday night meeting. But that, in essence, is what the speakers are doing. You know, they're testifying, but we use different terminology. Our members slip. They don't backslide. We have to be very careful not to do anything like that. And it was particularly true with me when I got here, because I have a preaching uncle. And in this entire world, the one person I did not want to be like was my preaching uncle. He was a tall, gaunt man with sunken cheeks, dark, piercing eyes, a little dumpy wife. They looked exactly like the couple that Somerset Maugham describes in Rain. You remember the preacher got mixed up with Sadie Thompson? And when he would visit our house, he would look down at me from the imperious height, enshroud my tiny hand in his enormous paw, and say, "How are you, Donald?" Just like that, I'd remember the last time I'd masturbated. I don't know why he hadn't specified it, but I knew that's what he was talking about, and he was against it. And I just could not get along with that man. We had no, even later, we could never have any meeting of the minds. He had been preaching over in Hong Kong when the Japanese started the Second World War there, and he was captured and thrown into a concentration camp for the balance of the war, which is about the only good thing they did, as near as I can recall. The rest of that co-Asian prosperity sphere really didn't amount to much. But after he was discharged, when the war was over, he came back to the States and then started another mission in Hong Kong. And I remember he showed me pictures of their meeting hall, and it was an incredible place. It had, it looked like granite columns in front, was a beautiful structure, and he belonged to a rather odd little sect, and I remember asking him, how can you afford such a hall? And he laughed, and because this was after the war. I'd been in the service, and when we met, I was an adult. I'd been in the Air Corps, and so I wasn't, we shook hands, and I thought about it, but it didn't bother me at all. And, but there was no way I could get across to this man. I thought for once we were talking about something similar, because he was telling me about this. He said, it's odd. We got this as God would give it to us for a pittance, because the native Chinese believed the building was haunted. It seemed like it abutted against a mountainside that was packed with caves. And the natives believed that these caves were occupied by ghosts, and so no one would rent this beautiful building, and they got it for virtually nothing. And he and I were both laughing. We had finally found something which to share. The only thing was that when I said to him, well, you weren't bothered by the ghosts, I assume. He said, no, I was not. The first night when they came in clanking their chains, I made the sign of him who died on the cross and ordered them out. And I realized that even then we were not laughing at the same thing. I had been laughing at the superstitious Chinese, and he had been laughing because they had the wrong juju. Now, the thing that I hated about him most, however, was that there was no way you could talk to him on any subject for more than 5 minutes before he turned it around. Yes, indeed, this is the end of the world. This time is on the, I died in cross. No matter what you talked to him about, he immediately converted it to his particular line of belief. And as much as I hate to admit it, I'm getting more like him every day. You can't talk to me on any subject for more than 5 minutes before I have converted it into an AA cliche. Yes, that's the way it is. Easy does it. I'm downtown, and today we had an emergency involving that Linwood school, and everybody's rushing around frantic-like, and they say, how come you're so calm, Don? I say, well, no matter what happens, it's not as bad as being in 4-point restraint and vomiting straight up. Well, that's probably true, but I wouldn't have quite thought of it in those terms. See, because my uncle, too, he had found an answer, and for him it worked. And it was not a subject matter for debate. It simply worked, and that's it. But it's the same way it is now with me and AA. There's not a subject matter. I can't even work with newcomers anymore because the quibbles and the things that are significant to them seem absolutely irrelevant now. And to work with a newcomer, you should be somewhere near it yourself. Otherwise, you want to say, never mind that crap, just jump up here where 20 years of sobriety will get you. Because when we come in, almost without exception, we are convinced that our disorder is a strange and mysterious malady for which science has neither cure nor adequate definition or name. And the longer you're sober, the more it seems that alcoholism is the simplest disorder ever to have afflicted mankind, the most easily recognizable, identifiable, and treatable. The very name, alcoholism, gives you such a marked clue as to what the problem is that if you weren't handicapped with a degree in psychology and someone were to say to you, what do you think causes alcoholism, I would assume you would come up with a correct response instantly. Alcohol. See, no alcohol, no alcoholism. Thank you. But really, isn't that it? There's no emotional graph of the alcoholic. No, there's nothing, no emotion that we have is distinguishable or different from the non-alcoholics. I've never known an alcoholic to suffer from any problem, psychic or otherwise, that non-alcoholics don't suffer from. Nothing unique about us. 1 person in 10 who drinks is going to be an alcoholic, approximately. And it doesn't seem to have too much to do with race, creed, color, sexual orientation, preference, or... we haven't had 10 people. Yes, we have. We've had 10 people, I guess, now walk on the face of the moon. One of them's already in AA. And they check those guys pretty good. If they're not wired right, they don't shoot them off. So psychosis or mental illness has nothing to do with alcoholism. By the way, I don't know if any of you have heard him pitch, but he used to... I don't know whether he said this, but the way what I heard him say, how I heard him say it, was that he stepped off into the dust of the moon, looked back at that blue-white globe of the earth, and for the first moment, panic struck him. He realized he was 180,000 miles from the nearest liquor store. But our book tells us that there are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. In ordinary English usage, that would mean the vast majority do not. We have psychotics, of course, on the program. Why should they get off any easier than the rest of us? In fact, if you're truly mentally ill but can stay sober, the chances are you'll become a guru. You'll start meetings. People will march in your backyard on Saturday morning. But it isn't necessary. In fact, the book says, it describes the various people, the sociopaths and the neurotics and every hue on the emotional spectrum, and then it says there are those too who are normal in every respect, except the effect alcohol has on them. Happy, loving, enjoyable people. Now, I've never met any of them, but when you sober up in California, you're not really apt to. The chances are they were prevalent in Akron when Bill was writing the book. But by and large, it does seem, at least in my experience, that the people I meet in Alcoholics Anonymous are a sharp group. In fact, you frequently hear it said that alcoholics, on the statistical average, have higher IQs, are a little more sharper and more sensitive than the non-alcoholic. You hear this said in AA meetings. So far as I can recall, it never came up down at the court. But, in a sense, that's true. I find that people in AA just a little bit quicker. We seem to see some in a brighter technicolor than other people. We don't have this moderating influence. I understand now there's a theory out about we don't seem to produce the endorphins that the non-alcoholics do, which is maybe the reason for the physical triggering by alcohol. But the alcoholism per se, according to our book, says it's the phenomenon of craving that results from taking the first drink. Other than that, nothing. And it's been my experience that seems to be the case. But you can't talk about that. How could you possibly deliver a whole talk dealing with the fact that you got it, that you can't drink? I mean, I'm sure, by the way, that there are people right here tonight wondering if they're really alcoholic. As if their opinion meant a shit. No, I mean, seriously, what merit is there in what a diabetic thinks about his condition? Or what purpose, what relevance is there in the view of a man with hemorrhoids, if he can get into a position to view it? You either have it or you haven't. And what you think about it has absolutely nothing to do with it, except insofar as it determines how you're going to die. Whether after a relatively contented and fruitful life or in the gutter chewing your tongue, despised by everybody who had the misfortune to come into contact with you. But that's a matter of very small concern socially. See, the alcoholics, we don't endanger Western civilization, even when we're drinking. I mean, we're not that well organized. It's the non-alcoholics you have to watch out for. But the alcoholism, the physical part of it, has nothing to do with, it is strange how no matter how much is written about it, I heard a guy give a talk, and he'd been sober a little while. He said, I made up my mind I was not going to be an alcoholic like my father. I mean, that's like saying, well, my father was a diabetic, and I made up my mind no matter what happened, I was not going to be a diabetic. You can't do anything about the physical aspect of it. And the only thing is that you can't talk about that, because if that was all there was to our disorder, we wouldn't need AA. We would quit. Can you really imagine repeating consistently anything that did to you what booze does to us? I mean, if for example, suppose I bought some Twinkies, and as a result, I went on a rampage spent more money than I had, damn near bankrupted my family, beat up on my wife, smashed up my car, and they put me in a mental hospital. I don't think the moment I would be released, I would head for a bakery. And yet that's the way it was. That's the way it was with the damn booze. Why do we repeat it? You know, if someone had come to me when I was 15 and said, Don, here's a pale amber elixir, we call her whiskey, but before you drink it, I want to tell you something. It's going to be the most foul thing you can put in your mouth and survive. It's going to rip and tear, it's going to clear your larynx, it's going to go down and make you shudder like a dog when it hits the bottom, you know, that involuntary tremor you get. Like a man leaving a urinal, you know, a twitch that doesn't mean anything, but it just comes. But in this instance, it's because your body wants to throw it back up again. You know, occasionally you'll hear a person, usually a newcomer or sometimes a thoughtless old-timer, say, I enjoyed the taste of a good bourbon. Now, they haven't really reflected on that. I'm talking about real good. Remember what good hot whiskey tasted like, particularly when you drunk it out of a paper sack? I'm not talking about the third or fourth drink. You could drink horse urine, it wouldn't matter then. That first pull, smooth. You know, you can sell you can sell a can of near beer now and then, but can you imagine selling non-alcoholic whiskey? God, you'll make you puke, boy. But, see, because that's it. You drink this stuff, and your body instantly wants to throw it back up again. Because remember, it's poisonous. That's where the word intoxicated comes from. It comes from the word toxic. Toxic means poisonous. And you drink enough of a poisonous, toxic substance, and you're going to become intoxicated, poisonous. So your body wants to throw it back up. But if you can just keep it down, then you can put a lot more on top of it, and you'll end up with a dry heaves and diarrhea. Now, I would like to think that if I tried it, I drank something that vile and ended up in that condition, I would quit. If I tried it half a dozen times and worked consistently, I'd like to think I would stop, because vomiting is a way of life, you know, is not a goal. I mean, even diarrhea, except insofar as it keeps you on the move, is not a subject for adventurous anticipation. And yet, as a result of my fever I had during the war, every time I drank, that happened to me. My first spiritual experience in AA was a solid bowel movement. You know, I could get up in the morning, run into the John if there was any uncertainty about which end of point I could hit two walls simultaneously. There was nothing weak about my stomach. Now, I didn't do that 6 times nor 60, probably 6,000 would be more like it. Or I never seemed to get the idea. And why is that? It has nothing to do with the physical alcoholism as such. It has to do with what our book describes as the mental obsession. And again, the mental obsession has nothing to do with insanity or mental illness. It virtually, well, isn't at this meeting, but in most meetings, they read like a Chinese water torture, a portion of chapter 3, which tells you, it says, the great obsession of the abnormal drinker is what? The persistence, the illusion that somehow, someday, he's going to control and enjoy his drinking. And so that's what we have to work on. It has nothing to do with intelligence, certainly. In fact, I remember when I started drinking, the very first drink, I was 15. We'd gone over, and I'd drunk before then to the extent of having sipped it. My father, like most people, made bootleg liquor during Depression years, and I learned as a little kid to siphon out of a crock, you know, so you could take it over the top and then stick it in the bottles. And you learn to do it because it tastes so rotten. You learn to do it without getting it in your mouth, which is handy later during the war years when you were siphoning gas. But I never really paid any attention to it until I was 15. We went over to San Francisco. We sent our eldest looking guy in. He bought a jug, and he came back, and we passed it around. Now, I didn't start drinking because I had a hole in my stomach, because I felt a sense of great inadequacy, because I was in some way different than other people and thought I was been adopted, or any of those things that I now hear. I started drinking because, by God, when you're 15 and you're a male, and you're going to be a man, and men drink whiskey. By God, and they don't draw the line at it. They drink whiskey and they smoke cigarettes, because that's what the people do when they're manly. So I took the gagging stuff, I kept it down naturally. I didn't want them to see me object to it. But it did, for me, that magic that it doesn't seem to do to the non-alcoholic. By the time the jug got back to me again, and there wasn't much in it, probably a pint for 4 of us, but by that where you can't drink much at 15. By the time it got back to me again, they had to tear it out of my hands. I didn't drink it all. And that very first night, I went through the entire panoply of alcoholic behavior. I felt marvelous. I went to a dance and danced, even though I didn't know how. Got into a fight. Blacked out. Vomited on myself, or at least somebody did. And woke up the next morning thinking, this is it. This is this magic elixir that is going to turn this spiritual lead into gold for me. And set out to drink as often as I possibly could. And it's a strange thing to show that mentality has nothing to do with it. I discovered, because I am naturally given to empirical data, that if I took a half a pint of 10 high whiskey, you never felt cheated when you drank 10 high, I'll tell you. Nothing subtle about it. And if I drank down to about that far in the bottle, half an inch, I was properly balanced on that razor's edge of intoxication and felt great. But if I drank that last half inch, I invariably got sick and threw up. And each night that we drank, I would drink down to the last half inch, see it, marvel, and commend myself on my perspicacity, and then drink it and throw up. And then one night we were at a party, and I drank that half inch, and I stepped outside into the garden to vomit because I was always sort of debonair. And when I came back in, wiping the corners of my lips, somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, Don, would you like a drink?" I said, "Yes, think I would, thank you." Drank right on top of my body having thrown a poisonous substance out. It was just as if at that moment I crossed the invisible line. The body, in essence, said, "Look, you fellow, if my protecting you from drinking a poison is not going to stop you from doing it, then I will have to change." And from that point on, I never got sick while I was drinking. In the morning, of course, trying to start again, I often had a hell of a time getting it started. But you change. See, the alcoholic is one who brags about how much he does drink until he begins to lie about it. We sit around and take everybody else home. You know, we are the ones, in the movies, the only place you ever see an alcoholic act happy and gay, put a lampshade on his head, ha ha ha. I mean, anybody with a lampshade on their head is not an alcoholic. That's a social drinker. They've had 2 or 3, they're feeling it, and they want you to see they're having fun. The alcoholic will be sitting quietly in the corner of the room. He knows where his drink is and how much is in it. He knows where your drink is and how much is in it. Come the shank of the evening, you better watch it. Alcoholics may drink out of the same bottle, but they don't share. He wants you to think that he's wasting his money. You will never see an alcoholic let you see that he's having. It's as if we wanted people to think we were wasting our time. I mean, outside of the Prussian army, there was nothing quite as militant as I with 12 beers in me. I'd get off that bar stool and go into the John. I might trip over a cigar butt, but you didn't stagger en route. The drunker you got, the more carefully you enunciated your words. That Maybelline look, so that they wouldn't see your eyes drooping. Just incredible. I don't know why, of course, I get off into that, except that it was not intelligence that had anything to do with it. I can remember the first time I got so drunk that I ended up going into a hospital. I was due to take the bar exam, and I wasn't at all worried about it. I hadn't studied it or gone to a review course or anything, because hum a couple of bars, you pick it up was my approach. But I'd gotten onto a drunk because I was just working and not doing anything where I had commitments. I couldn't get off the thing. And I went into a hospital for the first time. And they took a little check of me and decided that I indeed deserved the hospital. And so I remember lying there in a ward being fed intravenously in a bottle, glucose dripping down off the thing, and the other guys in the drunk ward were getting the same treatment. And I remember looking at that thing and then saying to the guy in the next bed, you know, that's quite a gadget. I wonder if you could buy one of these out on the street, because you know those mornings when you can't even keep muscatel down, you could take a bottle, hook it up, plug it into your arm, you know, and keep on going. Now, I don't know if you would call that social drinking. And yet I got up off that bed of pain, took the damn bar exam, passed so high, got a secret letter from the state bar telling me I was among the top 5 in the state and offering me a job with them. The intelligence has absolutely nothing to do with alcoholism. We are, by and large, a very sharp bunch of people. I mean, I don't know about how we stand with the world at large, but we're a very sharp bunch of people. And willpower certainly has absolutely nothing to do with it. You know, occasionally non-alcoholics do say of us, you know, you alkies, you're lacking in willpower. You know why they say that? They think we wanted to stay sober. If they had understood our true goal, they would have stood in awe at our dedication and perseverance. Now, what does the non-alcoholic have that they will pursue to the gates of insanity or death? Nothing. They're candy asses. I'm not mocking them. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. But they just don't have it here. The alcoholics I have known, and I've known a goodly number, have more damned willpower and determination, almost it defies comprehension. Now, of course, most of the time it takes the form of won't power. I won't do it, you son of a... We wouldn't cross the street if we thought it would make us feel better. I'll stay right here hurt as long as you can, you bitch. I won't give you the satisfaction, by God. Now think of the lengths we go to continue drinking. I mean, willpower is that. Hell, we have a great determination. If I thought that self-discipline and regimentation had anything to do with alcoholism, I'd still be battling the thing. But it has nothing to do with it. To tell us, you know, it's like all of those idiotic commercials that you see nowadays. Know when to say when. Hell, I knew when to say when until I'd had a few drinks. I mean, that's just insane. I remember once when I was in private practice arguing to a judge, it would be a crime, Your Honor, to put my man in jail for his fifth 502. He's an alcoholic. He wouldn't think of driving drunk when he's sober. And got the reaction you might expect. But it's true. Know when to say when. You know, it is odd, really, when you think about it. All of the advertisements, billions of dollars, are spent each year pushing an addictive substance, not addictive in the classic sense, but pushing alcohol onto the public. And never once in any of those commercials do you see an alcoholic, the true consumer. Remember, they've done statistical studies of who buys what. I think it's 7 or 8% of the populace drink over 50% of all the beer, wine, and whiskey made. Remember, 10% are alcoholics. So that means we drink over half of the market. And I think it's the next 7% drink the next 35%. So if all of the heavy drinkers and alcoholics were to quit, we'd bankrupt the industry. 85% of the market would be gone. See, we are the people that they depend on for their life, and yet we're never shown. See, we're absolutely never shown. You see a bunch of husky, healthy guys and a bunch of girls, you know, with skirts up to their ass, dancing around, ha ha ha, in the beer and wine joints. You know, those 3 bimbos dancing with a dog. You know, now they have never been in a beer and wine joint. Have you ever been in a beer and wine joint and saw anything like that? In a beer and wine joint, nothing is going on until the fight starts. They just don't show the true consumer. And I used to even do a shtick on that many years ago about, I got to watching these advertisements. And one of my favorites at that particular time was one, they said that was called the private stock. This wine company said, according to this mellow-voiced announcer, "We discovered some private stock and we have decided to share it with the public." As near as I can tell, they discovered 189 million gallons because you could buy it at that time by the fifth anywhere from Seattle to San Pedro for 47 cents. And I was delighted. I mean, I was truly impressed. How often do you find altruism on the part of a large corporation? But that they would share this, I thought was wonderful. The only thing was that they accompanied this burst of graciousness with a picture of what presumably was supposed to be the consumer. It was a fellow in a tuxedo seated across from in a candelabra-lit table from a lady in a formal. And they were drinking out of long, thin-stemmed glasses with a little globule at the top that would not have made a gulp. Now, I wouldn't want to destroy anyone's faith in American advertising, or certainly now that Eastern Europe is beginning to go capitalist, but the amount of Gallo port that is drunk out of those conditions, you could stick in your eye and never impair the vision. If they had wanted to show the true consumer, it would have begun with a pan shot under the Broadway Bridge. I mean, here would come a guy lurching down through the weeds. He's got a paper sack clutched by the neck so you won't know what's in it. You know, he's dined recently because there's a good grouping of chili on his shirt. He made a yeoman effort to bring his fly to the top and failed only through conditions beyond his control. He gets to the bottom, he parts the weeds, and there lies his lady fair in a print dress she got when she was released from Camarillo. And he says, "I got me some private stock." I think you'll be amused by its presumption. You know, I don't know if that would sell. They had another commercial, though, that was true. I mean, this announcer said, "There are times when only a beer will do it." Now, God knows no truer words have ever passed through the portals of the lips of man than that statement. But once again, they accompanied it with a picture of a guy trout fishing. I mean, he cast forth upon the rippling brook, brought in a little wiggling creature, and then you saw it bouncing around in the pan where he fried it and then sat down to eat it. And then the guy repeated, "There are times when only a beer will do it." And that's true, but that ain't one of them. You know, I mean, hell, a beer might be all right with fish. I don't know. I never fooled with finny things when I was drinking. But if they wanted truth, they would have shown a guy coming out of his bedroom on a Monday morning. I mean, his eyes are red balls of fire. Their hair on his teeth. He would drink his children's blood if the alcohol content were high enough. He opens the refrigerator, there's one Bergie. There are times when only a beer. In some, and the thing is, by the way, that we not only allow these things to be, you know, we advertise and push this stuff despite the fact that it kills more people and were killed in all of the wars. You know, it's a strange thing. Can you imagine any product which will kill 1 person in 10 who uses it being advertised? I mean, you can't get a cosmetic on the market if it'll give 1 woman in 100 a pimple. And we push something that is going to do that. And it's irrelevant because this is a democratic country and it's entirely appropriate, except that we don't have to continue to drink it. And there's nothing mysterious about sobriety. Occasionally in a beginner's meeting, a shaky hand will go up and the person will say, "How do you really stop drinking?" You know, as if there was some magic to it. You know, as if Oral or his brother Anal was going to say, "Heal, heal out thou demon rum," and you'd never want to drink again. Of course, it isn't like that. All that it takes to have eternal sobriety is the ability to control the movement of your elbow. You know, nobody puts it in your mouth. You have to do it all by yourself. You know, you've got to think, when you think about what you have to go through in order to, to take the first drink. You know, you've got to walk into a liquor store or a bar or something and order it, speak, something no other form of life can do. "I think I'll have a bottle of Old Fun and Frolic, please." and he'll give you a bottle of old shame and remorse like he always does. And then you have to uncap it, get it out, which isn't easy, you know. And sometimes, you know, I worked in a liquor store, and I also was a frequenter of it, and I've often thought they ought to say to you, would you like me to wrap it, or you didn't drink it here? And then you drink it. And if you can just stop at any of those points, you're capable of eternal sobriety. The thing is, you're not going to want to do it unless you do something about the obsession. And that's what we work on, the obsession. There's nothing mysterious about the obsession either. We talk about it, the word insanity is used in our book, but they're not talking about either the medical or legal definition of insanity. In fact, they tell us in the book how it is defined. They say you will know when you are restored to sanity. When? When you recoil from the first drink as from a flame. I mean, that's all they're talking about. The only thing is you're not going to want to do it unless you have something to put into place of what booze did for you. And booze did a great deal for most of us. And anyone who would give up something that would do that for them without a life and death struggle would have something wrong with them. Now today, of course, we have no such thing as pure alcoholics anymore. This disturbs many old timers, but it's inevitable. We don't have any pure alcoholics under age 30, probably under age 40. Everybody else has other things, and therefore you go through a period of redundancy where they get up and say, my name is Jim, I'm an alcoholic and an addict. You know, that's like saying, my name is Jim, I live in Los Angeles and in California. Because if you're an alcoholic, of course you're an addict. I mean, what the hell do you think? There may be addicts who aren't alcoholics. Medically speaking, that's very debatable, but there may be. I wouldn't know. But if you're an alcoholic, of course you're an addict. I was speaking down in Texas, and a guy was speaking ahead of me. He was a chain smoker, and as he butted his third cigarette and lit his fourth, he said, the thing I hate about these newcomers today is they keep talking about addiction. I want you to know I'm no addict. Apparently thought alcohol and nicotine were vitamins or something. But I don't talk about those other things only because I don't know anything about them. Half of the stuff the better living through chemistry available today, half of it hadn't even been invented when I quit. And the rest wasn't offered in the milieu in which I associated, something I sort of regretted in a way. When I was younger, I was always mistaken for the fuzz. You know, I would walk into a room and if people were giggling, they would eat their cigarettes, and I never knew why. And even in my antiquity, it sometimes happens to me. I was speaking up in Colonia, that area up in Oxnard a while back, and I somehow got into the wrong neighborhood, and a very friendly neighborhood. Whenever the car slowed, guys rushed forward with little balloons. Apparently there was a party or something going on. But when I asked them in my best Castilian where the AA meeting was, they ate the damn things. So I don't know anything about that. But whatever shoes you're using for your running, the program of AA is designed to take care of it. We do read in this meeting a chapter subtly captioned how it works. And they mean that. This is how it works. Because from time immemorial, there have been drunks, alcoholics, and a few of them, very rare, but few of them did find an answer. And they seem to find it in a kind of a cataclysmic experience, like our founder, Bill Wilson, in which they couldn't explain why it happened this way. If you want to read about it, read William James, our godfather, and his varieties of religious experience. He starts back with Caesar, Alexander the Great, who died a drunk in his 20s. He goes down through Mark Antony, who was always deep in the grape when he wasn't with Cleopatra. But, you know, he goes down through the line of St. Augustine, all of these rips, the twice-born, James calls them, down to John L. Sullivan, who threw a whiskey glass into a mirror and said, I'll never drink again. And James is a pragmatist. He didn't care how they explained it, because they each explained it in accordance with whatever religion was prevalent in their community. He didn't care about their explanation. He wanted to know what happened to them, what preceded the change, and what did they do thereafter to maintain it. And we have taken and adopted that in AA. We mass-produce spiritual experiences. Now, there were automobiles before Henry Ford came along, but there were very few, far between, because they're made by hand. They were so expensive the average citizen couldn't afford them. Henry came along, And he had the idea of a production line. You start with a naked chassis, you go down by the stages where people do the same thing. Within an hour, out at the other end rolled a Tin Lizzie that everybody in the country could afford. We do the same thing. We start off at step 1, and we go down. They're numbered, by the way, so that the intellectual will know the sequence. 1, 2, 3. And step 12 says, having had a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, as a result of the steps, not before. Doesn't say God could and would have caught. Then you're able to deal with the obsession. Your emotional barometer will not reach that spell of storm. It makes you take the first drink and off you go. Very few people are going to do that. Half the people in this room will be drunk before the year's out, without question. 19 out of 20 alcoholics still die drunk. And it isn't because they don't know about AA. It's impossible not to know about AA. Police brutality being what it is, you couldn't lie down up on Victory Boulevard at high noon without some cop giving you a list of meetings. You're dying, son. Get away, pig. You know, we all know about AA. We come to the meetings, we look around, feel superior to everybody, laugh at the speakers, and go out and drink again. And people here are going to do it, I'm sure. And if they do, and someone was to say to them, have you tried AA? Unless you have taken pencil and paper after getting down on your knees and asking for insight and written an inventory which you've read to somebody, and somebody says, have you tried AA? Be honest, say, hell no, I haven't tried it. Go to the meetings, feel superior. No, but I absolutely refuse to try the AA program, so I wouldn't have any idea whether it'd work or not. I don't know why I say that, because if you were that honest, you wouldn't be drunk. But it's true. That is the program, and it works. I've never seen it to fail. And the worst thing that can happen if you try AA is that you'll spend the balance of your life in full possession of your faculties. And I don't mean to minimize that as the threat. When you're new, it's a fearful thought. You'll never be hip and slick and cool anymore. You won't be able to say, oh, what's happening, man? I mean, shit, you'll know all the time. But on the other hand, you will experience what's going on. Yeah, I know, as I've preached many times before, that part of my problem is that I am getting old, and therefore maybe my program hasn't improved, just that I don't have that many days left, and I don't want to waste any more of them on the nod, sodden, drunk, unaware of what's happening, or sick and hospitalized and fed intravenously, or locked up in jail because I made a mess of myself and society rubbed my nose in it for a while, or resentful getting ready for the next one. I've given up the thought of suicide. How much time would I really save, when you get down to it? I want to know what's going on every single day, and I want to experience it, even those dirty, mean, gut-twisting days, and you're going to have those. Very few of them, but you will have them. Why not? The world is the old world yet. The universe doesn't rise up on its tippy-toe because we stop sucking on a jug. But most of the time, you're going to experience a good, healthy, and happy life. And you can get used to happiness. It's not really as frightening as the newcomer might think, because it will be broken by periods of pain. If there's anything you want to do, now is the only time to do it. I know I preach on that all the time, how we're allotted 70 years. Multiply 70 by 365 and you get a very small figure, about 25,000. If someone gave you $25,000, you wouldn't wad it up by the handful, throw it in the toilet and flush it away, I don't believe. Though you can get money back, but you can never get a day back. Every single day is irreplaceable, and there's a very few of them left. For any of us, half a century and everybody in this room is going to be gone. The wink of the celestial eye, pop, we rise like bubbles in champagne and we're off. And to think that we want to blow those things by impairing our faculties. Now is the only time to live. I haven't time to talk about all the nutty things and crazy things I've done while I'm sober, but I think I have done everything I ever fantasized or wished to do. And life is what AA is about. It is about living. Get out and do it, for God's sakes. Whatever it is you want to do. I mean, don't listen to all the nonsense you'll hear from the podium about conservative living. Or moderation is for a rumor to me and a damn fool thing. Anything worth doing is worth doing to excess, for Christ's sakes. Get out and get with it. And we tell people, do not become emotionally involved in the first year. We don't know if that's good advice, because in the history of AA, no newcomer's ever taken it. Get out and get it on, whatever it is, and just don't get drunk about it. For Christ's sakes, don't take marriage personally. I'm sorry. But this is what it is. If you want to do anything to improve society, if you want to strike a blow for justice, aid your fellow men, now you do it. Because in the tomb, nobody raises their hand for any cause. If you want to do something loving and tender, lewd and lustful, now is the time to do that also. You know, the poet says, the grave, it is a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. See, this is the only time to do anything. Another poet said, the bird of time is but a little way to flutter. The bird is on the wing. I don't have too much of a flight left, but I hope a number of you will stick around and fly with me. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.